John Cain was Premier of Victoria from 1982 to 1990, one of the longest and most successful premierships in Victorian history. He won 3 consecutive elections and retired undefeated, an achievement almost unimaginable today. According to the Brains Trust at Wikipedia, we need to be careful not to confuse John Cain with John McCain. Why anyone would mistake the milkshake-loving former member for Bundoora with the veteran Republican senator from Arizona, I don't know. Otherwise, I'm grateful to Wikipedia. After ending the 27-year Liberal Party reign under Premiers Henry Bolte, Dick Hamer and Lindsay Thompson, with a thumping 17-seat landslide, Cain led a remarkable period of reform in education, environmental protection, the law and public administration. His government introduced nude beaches, legalised brothels, allowed Sunday VFL football, and extended the trading hours of shops, nightclubs and hotels. John Cain might not have been the cartoonist's first choice as a caricature, but he gave them plenty of subject material to work with. And now a special moment. A Premier reveals what it was like to be on the receiving end of the cartoonist's pen. Please welcome John Cain.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, and Michael Smith, who's the chair of the Hall of Fame selection panel, former Premier John Brumby, Carolyn Fraser, the exhibition curator, and Kate Torney, our CEO of the State Library and State Librarian. Cartoonists at large and men and women of Victoria, we meet on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Yes, politicians do become subjective, if not introverted, at the mention of cartoonists, just the mere mention. Don Watson wrote some speeches for me in the late 1980s, and he once wrote that a cartoonist drew my head in the shape of a sideways map of Australia. Only the mainland, but no Tasmania. But you know the shape of it. The Cape York is my nose, and the Great Australian Bible is the back of my head. He said that I was the first Australian politician to have the back of his head impersonated. Now, I didn't find that very convincing, but he also went on to say that I was served by a nationalistic factor in these cartoons, and if to the cartoonist's eye my head bore a resemblance to the national map, then I should not complain. Lastly, he said that those lines that they drew all over it should not be taken for ravines and valleys, because they were not. He said they were song lines. They were ancient channels of communication, engraved by knowledge and wisdom. Look, the power of cartooning was made very clear to me in my first year at secondary schools, 1943, the height of the war. The Japanese had come in. We had slit trenches being built around our schools, both at the primary school I'd left and Northcote High School. We had an English teacher. And I think, looking back, he must have been, like many were at that time, drawn from the retirement pool to make up for the teachers that had gone overseas. He told us all that an example of the best English was the bulletin. We had to read the bulletin, which we did under his tutelage, but cartooning was part of its culture, he told us. That historically there'd been 2 streams of behaviour from the bulletin days, and Mike Smith was good enough to lend me, when I spoke to him about this engagement, to lend me a book called Javelin, The Journalistic Javelin. I suppose a number of you have read it, by Patricia Rolfe. Mike Smith had a copy, and he brought it around straight away. And the 2 streams that are there are that cartoonists were directed by the writers in the bulletin to illustrate and enhance their cause. But the second stream worked to express their own views and how well they were able to do it. You see, I think black and white art, and I wish I could do it, is one of the great traditions of this country. Some say in the readings that it's really founded by visiting Americans, Englishmen and New Zealanders. And somebody here at the back confirmed that a little earlier this evening. But Australian radicalism in publications like the Bulletin was certainly fuelled by them, people from overseas. We do like the sardonic and to mock and to knock, as all those cartoons you've seen on the screen behind, about which I'll say a little later. But our artists aren't always satirical and political. They like sport. Victoria's a great field for them in that regard. And often cartoonists, I think it's fair to say, read the public mind more acutely than writers. Through humour, wit and prescience, they can challenge the received wisdom or the dominant voice, or they can reinforce it. And that's the experience we have had. The great thing about cartooning, I think, is that whether it's black and white or colour, it's the democratic nature of it. Now, it's accessible in every sense. It's popular art, it's the people's voice. All of those things. And that's why I think in undemocratic countries, cartoonists are among the first who are suppressed, and often you find that they are the first to re-emerge subversively in the years that follow. Now look, all those cartoons you've seen there, and I've checked this with the curator, they come out of the print media. That's where they're sourced in the popular context. And the big issue around cartooning and its future is what's the electronic media and the social media doing to it? I mean, all that stuff there of me and my predecessors and John Brumby and others, it's terribly interesting, but we may not have it in that form in the near future, and that's what I express as a concern. You see, the electronic media, with all the benefits it's alleged to have, doesn't give the cartoonist time to address contemporary issues, or his editors time to just check out, perhaps with the lawyers or somebody else, as to whether they might attract some attention they don't want. So the long deadlines that people had before with the print media, they could choose an issue, they could develop it, they had time to consider and get advice around the defamation prospects. Social media, well, I don't quite understand all that, I have to say, but it has certainly generated a recklessness and an approach to what's said being transmitted instantly. Nobody thinks about it. Great for lawyers. Conflict is common as a result. And they just go for their lives regardless of the consequences. So what I'm saying to you is that the electronic media has really changed the whole game. And all that there, we may not have the benefits of it in the future. You see, what the newspaper world is saying now, I'm reliably informed, is that print is a drag on revenue. A drag on revenue. Get out of it as quickly as you can and get into the electronic stuff. Now, where does that leave cartooning? Hastily prepared, small depiction, caricature scope is diminished, I'm reliably informed, and is its relevance diminished as a result of that? That's something we ought to think about. Many say it is. That's the bad news from me. On the other hand, there's some good news for cartoonists. Good news, very good news. The pool of material is growing. The issues and subjects are almost boundless now. If you look at politics, what's happening, and I say that beyond the scope, beyond what I think are the uncharted boundaries of Trump and truth or untruth, your potential subjects and your people are growing almost as you look at it daily. Now, how is this so? What I want to say to you is that the Australian political system is working for you cartoonists. It's working for the media too. It's working hard. And it's very effective at the moment. Now, look, the Westminster system works best in what I'll call two principal parties, mainstream, broad church, umbrella parties, call it what you will. But two principal parties, a government and alternative government. And the corollary of that is that those two parties can, and they used to, do research, solid research. I was part of it. We got 3 terms, Mark, because we did research and did policy development. They debate policy within their parties. They make public policy. They go out and road test it, and they introduce it into the society. And what comes out of that is an order and coherent policy, not always, and mostly, not always again, consensus in those parties. Now, that just doesn't happen now. And that's the great lesson of our times. It is not happening. Those political parties are empty, hollowed-out logs. They're narrow in their vision. They're dominated by factional forces within them. They seek to satisfy opinion polls about the short term. And I suppose most heinous of all, they just crave money from the interest groups to deliver what they believe the interest groups want. Now, all that is happening at a time when the public distrusts a wide range of our institutions. The churches, and you know why. The trade unions, and you know why. Business, and you know why, particularly the banks. You can... politicians and their parties are on the list too. The coppers the jury's still out, I think. But so many of those trusted, long-term, trusted institutions are no longer trusted. What I want to say to you is that the collapse of authority and integrity and respect for those principal parties, and that's what it is, they don't care for the parties, has 3 consequences. And all those consequences affect you cartoonists. The mainstream parties in recent years in Australian politics have held executive government now, and they've done so with a power that's diminished. If you only get 33 to 34, 35 or 36% of the primary vote in the electorate, you don't carry the moral authority to govern. You don't have it. You're diminished as a result. That's what's been happening. That's what's been happening. And you get what the media loves. You get leadership challenges. You get early election speculation. It's made for you. Absolutely made for you. You cartoonists relish this. You've got a great future ahead of you. What I'm saying to you is that governments, politicians, leaders require that moral authority and that unambiguous electoral authority to govern best. We were elected 82, 85 and 88. And I can tell you, Mark, you're right. We were fortunate to be elected 3 times. You're at your strongest when you're first elected and you throw out an existing government. After about 2 years, 2.5 years, they take you on. You're diminished as your term goes on. The interest groups take you on, the media takes you on, the public authorities take you on, and yes, some even in your own party take you on. Now, if you're re-elected, your authority's restored. You're back in business. You're reinvigorated, I think is the best way to put it. That's not happening now. And that's why this society is... the second thing is the mainstream parties are further weakened by the extremists at both ends. They're beauty, some of them. Today they're burrowing away at one end about the carbon issue. They're like rats on a piece of cheese, and they get a bit and they want to go further. They never stop. And that's what government is afflicted by now. People on the extremes of their own so-called mainstream parties never leave them alone. And then the third factor, of course, is some break away and form new shows, fringe parties, so-called interest groups. They're proliferating now. You see, where you only have less than 70% of the electorate voting for those mainstream parties, there's a very fertile field left behind. And all of those forces within government and on the fringes of government, they back the populist causes. I use the plural. They go for the easy bits. They chase the media. They are almost like a sort of feisty sideshow at times. They're defined as newsworthy, and they are, many of them, and they're colourful. So my message tonight is to say that's terrific there, all that history. You gave a great account of it, Mike. It is history. And whether it goes on with those people showing those capacities, a lot will depend upon the desire of the cartoonists and those around them to go on or to have it repeated in the years ahead. You've got a show at the moment with what's happening in politics. So you have a great prospect or a great future in prospect. And the subject that you have exhibited so well in exploiting with your capacities is there for you and growing in number and in diversity. It's across the gender barrier now, it's terrific. It's in every way there for racism is there for you, it's all there. Everything's bubbling away waiting to be addressed. And you have a lot to be thankful for, I think, despite the fact that the print media is going to let you down, I think, and I'm afraid it will in the years immediately ahead. Can I finally say, in launching this exhibition, the partnership between the State Library and your press club, Mark and Mike, is a very, very advantageous one for both. I spent a bit of time here at the library on the board and president for some years. They know how to look after a collection. They will look after it well, and they'll see it's presented in the most desirable and advantageous way for you. So, and Kate, you can be assured that these people bring a lot of material to your collection. And the collection is the thing for this which this library is famous. It's a great collection. A lot of my stuff's in there too, so you're looking after it. So I'm delighted to be asked to be part of this launch today. I wish it success, and I formally launch the exhibition. Thank you very much.